Lovely voice, that. So the Lunch and Learn so far, so we do them every month. I'm not going to read through all of those, but as I put that there really to say we cover a wide variety of topics. We started off being very much focused on training design, and as you can see, it's got a little bit broader. We've covered virtual tools, we've covered how to do PowerPoints, we've covered gamification and liberating structures, and Bryony's stepped in to run an event for us, and so all sorts of things there. So if you're a VIP, you can just go and get those on demand, or if not, just look on the resources page of the Training Designers Club and you can get the recordings as well if you wish. But today we are all about designing with neurodiversity in mind. A very quick introduction to me and Sam. When we started doing these, there would only be 6 people on the call, so we'd all have a little chance to introduce ourselves, but now I do have to restrict it, unfortunately. But feel free to introduce yourselves in chat, that's absolutely fine. Sam is going to take the majority of the session, and she's going to talk about the reasonable adjustments that we need to take into account when thinking about neurodiversity, accommodations prior to delivery, and adaptations to consider for delivery. So yes, it's mostly thinking about the design side, but we are also thinking about the delivery side as well, because I know most of you do deliver as well as design. So that will take us just over an hour, and then following that, we will hopefully have time for any questions and answers. If we get time, which we very rarely do, you can pop your takeaway actions in the chat for us, and I will quickly tell you what our next topic is going to be, and that will take us to 2:30, when you are all released and hopefully not having to go back to some awful work. You can all finish early, you got permission. So just some quick introductions. For those of you who don't know me or haven't attended one of these before, I'm the community manager of the Training Designers Club. Prior to this, I spent a lot of time designing bespoke training. That was my main business for over 15 years. Did delivery and facilitation as well, but spent most of the time designing bespoke courses for corporate clients. And Sam, if you want to just introduce yourself, my lovely.
Yes, I call myself the autistic interpreter, and I do so because I spent the first 35 years of my life trying to be somebody else and trying to fit in, as some of you might think, yeah, I've done that too. But what I didn't realise was it wasn't just trying to fit in generally, it was because I'm neurodivergent, I'm autistic, and I was trying to be neurotypical, which is quite challenging. So lots of masking, lots of stress and anxiety. But I learned the language of neurotypicals, and that's how come I interpret between the two groups. And I also interpret between employers and employees. So that's where the interpreter bit comes from. But I've got 25 years experience in corporate, and I've been running my business since 2008.
So you are one of us as well, aren't you, Sam? I mean, you are an L&D professional. You're not just some randomer that we've pulled off the street.
No, I've been delivering training for a while. Yeah.
So what I will do, Sam, is I'll stop sharing my slides so you can take over from this point, if that's okay.
Lovely.
Oh, okay. Stop share. There we go.
Okie dokie. So I don't have a whole bunch of slides. I've got a few slides to show you a little bit later. But for one of the sections. But other than that, I'm actually going to leave you with a PDF that I'm going to put in the chat at the end, because I don't want you to sit there reading the PDF. I want you to listen to me. I know, big ego, but I do want you to listen to me. All of the things that I'm telling you will be in the PDF, but please feel free, obviously, to make your own notes, because I think that's very valuable when you have your own insights that you want to jot down. But you will have all of this in front of you. So the 3 areas that we're going to cover, Sheridan's already told you. So let's start with the reasonable adjustments and designing for a neurodiverse attendee. And of course, whenever we're designing training, and please forgive me if I'm teaching any of you to suck eggs, but I don't know where you're starting from. So I'm just going to start from the beginning. We do a gap analysis and set the objectives. Whether it's training design that we're cooking up ourselves to deliver as a product, or whether we're going to a corporate and they're asking us to deliver a very specific piece of training or a course, then that's the gap analysis and the objective setting kind of opportunity. But some of the questions that you might not have been asking of the client or of yourself is everybody starting from the same place. We know that gap analysis allows us to ask the question, how do I get you from A to B? And that's a good, really simple way of describing what the gap analysis is, because the bit in the middle is the training, so I can get you to B. But if we don't know where everyone is starting from, some people are on A, some people are on Z, some people are on B and a half already, and they're just there anyway. So it's not always easy to understand what kind of mix you've got in the room, but your client should know. And if you're doing it for yourself, hopefully the way that you're targeting your marketing, whether it's to your group in Facebook or whether it's to the outside world as an open course, hopefully your language will be clear enough to clearly state where you are and this training is for you. Hope that makes sense.
Even if you're internal as well, because some people here are internal, it's about selecting the right course, isn't it? Because otherwise just looking through a course directory doesn't really mean a lot to people.
And what's the difference between a beginner and a novice? You know, that often pops up where it'll say beginner or novice or intermediate, and I'm like, so I don't think I'm an expert, but I think I'm better than a beginner maybe. But then you find out there's stuff that you didn't know in the beginner section when you try to do the intermediate. So it's always like you don't know what everyone else knows. But in particular, if you're working with a client where you're delivering some training, you can ask the client, where's everybody starting from? And that includes where are they starting from in terms of experience of working. So you could have someone who's as green as you like, they're an apprentice, or perhaps they're an intern. So they're fresh out of school, they know nothing, really, they know nothing. They barely know how to get out of bed and get themselves to work, never mind what to do in the job. So they're starting from 0, and the rest of the class might be starting from 5 out of 10. So how do you get that person from 0 to 5 so everyone can be taught from 5 to 10? So I hope that's a clear analogy for you. And of course, one of the ways is pre-work, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But asking the client what they want to achieve, or if you're the client, what do I want to achieve? Do you know who's in the audience? And figuring out really early on who your participants, passengers, prisoners, and protesters are. If your client happens to be HR or learning and development, chances are they won't know the people very well who are going to go on the course if it's a large organization. And it might be that you need to ask, could I talk to the team leader of that team or that group of people so I can get some insight into the audience? It's rare that you'll get a no. Usually you'll get, I'll see what I can do for you, and you know, get you together for a half-an-hour chat. Most places want you to succeed, and most places are not expecting you to ask that question. So just be prepared for a reaction of, oh, yeah, okay. So it's not that you've said anything wrong, it's just that they probably won't expect you to ask that question. And a lot of traditional information about training is based on neurotypical trainers and attendees. Studies that have been done on training tend to have been done on groups of people who are not considered to be neurodiverse. So all of the things that we've learned as generic training steps and things like that tend to be very mainstream, as we might call it. And it's really important to have crystal clear language. So I mentioned taking from A to B, it's that crystal clear language. A lot of people who are neurodiverse, and I'm going to go into what that means in a minute, are very literal. And things like idioms, you know, as dry as dust, or a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Language like that can be really confusing to some people because it doesn't mean anything. It's just, well, what does that mean? And even though it might be explained to them, they can't apply it to anything. So it's important to be really, really clear with our language so that we don't make any assumptions about people's understanding. And that's especially true if English is their second language. English is a hard language to learn. If you've learnt it from you know, the ear dots and it's your native tongue, I don't think we fully appreciate how difficult English is. But certainly if you've learned it as a second or third language, it's very, very challenging. It's not an easy one.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were saying that, Sam, and I'm guilty of this because I've only ever worked with UK-centric businesses. And I do use colloquialisms quite a lot. And as you were saying that, I thought, I know that Marina, she works cross-culturally, and it can just cause so much confusion, can't it? Just by our neighbours, people who know us, our colleagues, they know exactly what we mean. But as soon as we go out of that circle, it's like, what is she talking about?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then you've lost them because they're just, I don't really know what's going on now. So it's really important to be super clear in your language. And the second thing is the differences in processing in the mind. So this is kind of the biggest chunk that you're probably the most interested in, and that's about how different the brain can be and how it presents when you're considering your training. So obviously we've got your visual, your audio, and your kinesthetic. I'd hope you all know about that, but also blended. So for a lot of people, they need more than one way to consume the content for it to really land. We talk about in marketing having, well, in the old days, it was 7 touch points. Apparently nowadays it's 39 touch points before somebody hits the buy button. Which is horrific. But certainly we need to hear things more than one way often for it to really, really land, and sometimes even in a different voice. And it's different as well when you're consuming it online compared to when you're consuming it in person. There's a different energy, a different vibe. And a lot of people who are considered to be neurodivergent are most sensitive to energy. And the people who are in this group of neurodiverse people, they could be autistic, they might have ADHD, they might have something called pathological demand avoidance, which in short is like procrastination on steroids, where you don't really have a choice, and it can be very debilitating. It can go so far as people can lose their homes because they can't pick up the phone to talk to utilities, the council, or whatever. The demand is too great and it's hard for them to function at all. That's the extreme end. You've also got sensory processing difficulties. In the book of DSM, where they diagnose these things, it's called a disorder, but a lot of people in the neurodiverse world hate the word disorder because it implies we're broken, and I'm not broken, I'm just different. And the sensory processing difficulties literally cover all the senses. So whether something is too loud, too bright, too smelly, tastes funny, or whether it's about a sensation on your skin or a temperature, something like that. If any of those things are too much or too little, there's not enough input, they can cause a problem. And not everybody knows that they have a sensitivity, they just know that they're uncomfortable. So you can't always rely on people to self-advocate, which does make it a bit of a muddy pond to get through. But on the whole, if you're teaching adults, they've probably got a fair idea about the kind of neurodivergency that they've got roughly, or at least they know what they like and what they don't like and what they can do and what they can't do. Other things that might be included in that mix of neurodivergence is dyslexia and dyspraxia, which again, short version, clumsy on steroids. You've got dyscalculia, which is where the numbers jump around for you. It's like the number version of dyslexia. And you've got dysgraphia, which is where images are very difficult for people to interpret. So visuals are very challenging for them. They tend to consume things either in words by reading them or through auditory. What else have I got on my list in my head that I forgot? Oh, highly sensitive person, I should mention. So a highly sensitive person, have you ever known anyone who's been told that you're too sensitive? if it's not been you, do you know someone else perhaps who's been told that? Well, the chances are they might be a highly sensitive person. And that means that all of their senses are turned up, and not just their physical senses, their emotions, their energy receptors, their empathy. And it's a complete myth that autistic people don't feel empathy. In fact, a lot of autistic people are overwhelmed by empathy and can't stop the reaction. So where you might see something and it's a bit sad, and you might go, oh, that's a bit sad. Oh, an autistic person might be in floods of tears for an hour because it just devastated them and they can't stop it. And they might even need to be consoled. And that can be hard to handle. Imagine if you're at work and you've seen something that's given you that reaction, and now, you know, having emotions at work. Oh no, you can't have an emotion, especially if you're a woman. Oh no, how dare you? I've even been in an office where I cried happy tears because someone had done something nice for me, and all the men in the office moved away from me like I had the plague. It's like, oh my God, she's crying. What do we do with that? I'm like, it's happy tears, it's okay. But yeah, so emotions can be big, and that's okay. And just giving someone that space to experience that emotion. And in some of your training, an emotion might come up for somebody, or a reaction might come up for somebody, and it might take them by surprise. I was going through coaching training when I had a big emotion come up for me, and I suddenly started crying for apparently no reason. And that took me by surprise, and I felt a bit embarrassed. But the lady who was training was really good, and she said that there's absolutely a brilliant reason why you're crying, because your body needs to release something. And if you can release it, you can move on. But if you try and hold it in and suppress it, you're always on the edge of it all the time. So it's like holding a heavy bag all the time. At some point, you're going to drop the bag, probably when it looks really inappropriate. And then you might have a bit of a meltdown, and everyone's like, oh my God, you know, dramatic. Maybe you dropped a knife when you went to the kitchen. You know, have you ever had that kind of last straw moment where a few things have been happening through the day, and then one more thing happens and you're like, for God's sake, and you're thinking, hang on a minute, I dropped a knife. You know, it's really not that big a deal. But, you know, to you, that was the very last straw. That's all you had left to give today on your energy levels, and it broke you. And that happens quite a lot. And meltdowns can look completely different. So you've got meltdowns that are large and explosive. They could even be violent. You have them explosive in terms of tears and drama. You have shutdowns where someone goes completely mute, and they might also physically shut down. And you have other reactions where people will come out fighting, but it will be energetic rather than aggressive. So there's lots of different ways it might present itself where someone's really struggling to handle the situation. And it might mean they just need to have 5 minutes to themselves, even if it's at the cost of them missing a little bit of your training. Because I wouldn't expect you to stop your training for them. But if they are struggling and for some reason you've triggered something, obviously you didn't mean to, but you don't know what's the trigger and what isn't for some people, then it's okay. It's just about giving them the space to have that moment to gather themselves. You might also notice that individuals might do what's called stimming, and that's self-regulatory, soothing activities. It might be that they flap with their hands. It might be that they need to fiddle with things. When I train in person, I've got these little pom-poms, and I've got a blue one and a white one because I use it to demonstrate that we are both the same and different as humans. because, you know, it's a metaphor, right? But people get to play with them and fiddle with them, and they're silent. So they're not bothering anybody else. They can juggle with them, they can muck about with them, they can take them home with them. And if you don't already do it, it's worth thinking about having some kind of little rubber toys that you can wash and disinfect, perhaps, or give them something super cheap. Like I bought 1,000 pom-poms off eBay, right? So they're super cheap. So I give them away. I don't expect them back. Once they've been fondling it, I don't really want it back anyway. And I'm looking over here because I've got a bag of bits and bobs that I use. I'll show you examples. So I've got like a little bendy guy here, and you can make him into all sorts of different shapes. I've got one of these, which is like a twisty kind of fiddly toy. You can make it into all sorts of different shapes as well, where it's a bracelet, sort of just experience how it feels in your hand when it turns. We've also got just plain old rubber snakes, because they're quite nice to stretch, and they're squidgy. You can squidge them with your fingers. You can tell that I like these sort of things, can't you?
Yeah, it's one. I think, you know, we've put fiddle toys out, haven't we, for years, without fully understanding why, apart from some people really find it helpful. You know, I couldn't have told you exactly why we did that, except for it can really help some people to concentrate. So it's interesting to have this better understanding about it now.
I would totally, and I can help you understand further on why it's helping them to concentrate. So, you know, when we think of our brain as being two halves, your left side and your right side, so you've got your right side being all creative and your left side being all logical. Well, your left side's the one that learns the new stuff generally, and it passes information over to the creative side, and the creative side talks to the left side. You know, they're not kind of exclusively in your brain like this, like I'm not talking to you. they're working together. But generally, it's also the same reason why some people need to listen to music whilst they're working. They're trying to keep their creative brain happy and busy. So when I'm doing something really complex on an Excel spreadsheet, I'll send my brain off to a Muse concert or something in my head so I can do the work. And the fact the music is on doesn't mean it's not interfering with my work. It's enabling me to do the work. And the same with the fiddling with the toys. If I'm fiddling with this, my creative brain's going, what shape can I make this into? How does this feel? Oh, that's nice and novel. That's yummy. Meanwhile, my logical brain is soaking in all of the training. And that's why it works so well, because it's helping to keep the creative side of your brain happy. So that's nice.
So now we know.
So now you know. Now in your PDF, because there isn't time to go through all of them today, you have a full one page on traits that you might notice about people who are autistic. And it might be that when you look at it, you go, oh, crikey, yeah, I've got a few of those, or I know someone who has, and that's perfectly normal. You know, when people say, oh, everyone's on the spectrum, that's not strictly true. But what it is when you have the sum of many parts and everything is really difficult because they're all operating at the same time, that's autism, where everything is hard work and a struggle because you've got lots of plates spinning all the time. And you may experience those traits to a very extreme degree. I'm very fortunate that most of the traits that I experience aren't experienced to an extreme degree. They're moderate, I would say. But also, I've spent 48 years putting in coping techniques and mechanisms and loopholes and all that sort of stuff, so that it is easy for me to navigate the world and overcome some of my nature. And not everybody's able to do that, but women are really, really great at adapting and masking and making changes where they need to in order to fit in, get on, and just get on with stuff, because we're good like that. We also often it gets mixed up with the difference between empathy and sympathy, and I've put that in your pack as well, because there's 3 different types of empathy, and it often gets confused with sympathy. So when someone has a conversation with someone and actually what they're expecting is sympathy, what they'll say is, oh, you know, you're not very empathetic, because a lot of people get the two mixed up. So I can stand in your shoes and understand how you feel but you can't make me care. If you've done something really stupid and you knew it was stupid, but you did it anyway, I haven't got a whole heap of sympathy for you. Sorry, I'll go into fix mode and go, okay, that was silly. Yes, I can understand how you feel right now. So let's move straight on to solving the problem. But then the person will be like, oh, you're not very sympathetic. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not very sympathetic, but I am empathetic and I'll help you solve it. So what do you want? Do you want to wallow in it or do you want to fix it? People get to know quite quickly whether or not to tell me stuff. And I do have sympathy, by the way, for things that weren't it, in my mind. I've also given you a tool called the meta mirror, which is a really useful exercise to teach people who are not self-aware on how to see things from other people's perspectives. It's really, really useful if you're asked to gain group buy-in, and you might have individuals who are not self-aware, and some are altruistic, some are not. Some have no idea of their impact on others. So you can use the meta mirror in your training design as one of your exercises, perhaps as a role play. I use it in one of my role plays where you have an actor, a second actor, and an observer. And you can use it yourself. If you've had a conversation with someone and it didn't go well, and you're thinking, what went wrong there? You can replay it in your head as yourself, replay it in your head, imagining what it was like for the other person. And then you can replay it in your head, imagining watching it. So it's quite a cerebral activity to do. Not everybody's cup of tea, I appreciate, but it's really useful if you do it as a role play.
That's perceptual positioning, isn't it? It's an NLP thing, and if you can actually act it out as well, it's a move around that can be quite a powerful thing.
Absolutely, you get real aha moments out of it.
So what do we need to be thinking about, Sam, when we're actually designing training? You know, because there's a lot of things for us to be aware of and to notice, but you know, I'm thinking, you know, how do I incorporate all of this into what I do?
Well, so incorporating it into training design it's about anticipating what people need so that you don't have to try and bolt it on afterwards, because there's nothing worse than creating some training and then discovering you have somebody who has some extra needs, and then having to try and work backwards and seeing how you can make it fit into what you've already designed. That's painful. And then I don't know, I would feel resentful towards that person, which is the wrong thing to feel, but I would, because I'm like, oh, now I'm gonna have to spend more time doing this. When actually, if I'd packed it in at the beginning, I wouldn't have to do it towards the end. So it's things like making sure that any pre-work that you're doing, we're actually moving on to the second section here, accommodations, prior to delivery. So knowing that not everyone will complete pre-work, we know this. If you've ever done any training, some people will, some people won't.
Yes, indeed.
Never mind that some people might have pathological demand avoidance, which is this resistance that they're not really in control of. But certainly they might do it lastminute.com, and that's fine as long as they've done it. It doesn't matter when they do it. But you might consider a stepped response instead. So to make your life easier, you could say, right, we're training on day 7. So on day 1, I would like you to send me the answers to a little quiz or a poll or something, so I can gauge where you're at, which helps me when I'm delivering my training, because I'll have a really good, clear idea of who I've got in the room and where they're starting from when we're thinking about A to B. Or it might be that you decide, actually, I'm going to send you a video and I just want you to watch it, and I'm going to ask you a question and I want you to send me the answer to the question, just one, but that tells you they've watched the video to answer the question. And by asking them to do something very specific and coming back to you, or if you're working with a client that won't give you access to individuals, they'll have to be the conduit to make this happen. So when you're right at the basics of that first conversation with your client, letting them know they're going to have to do some work too. If they're not going to give you access to the attendees, which a lot of places won't, then they'll have to be the conduit to pass through the pre-work and any feedback and anything else that you want to get to them. And obviously understanding whether or not they're allowed to view things on YouTube is important. So doing that prep work. And I wouldn't give them anything more than three. I wouldn't give any more than three things in the prep, right? I mean, human beings love threes anyway, but if you're really up against it work-wise, you're unlikely to do more than three things, really. But
regardless of any neurodiversity that you've got, it's just like,
absolutely.
I haven't time for this.
Absolutely. And I would encourage you to give the pre-work in different ways if you can. So when I give out pre-work for a training session, I'll often give a document, a video, and I might also send them a little quiz or a poll. And I'll say to them, I'd love you to do one of these. Some people will do all of them, keen as mustard. Great, fine by me. But some people will go, I think I've got time to watch a 5-minute video. I can do that. Some people might look at the poll and go, oh God, not another poll. No, I can't do it. So they're never going to do it. So if you had only offered them that option, that's not going to happen. And other people want time to sit there with a cuppa. They've printed out the document and they want to read it. Because that's how they consume things.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, Sam, because, you know, just again, by chance and all the work I do in helping people to design great training, I've always talked about giving people multiple routes in to the learning.
Absolutely.
So that's, again, it's just one of those things that instinctively makes sense to me. But equally, you need to do something with it, I think, because, you know, there's no question, my daughter's neurodiverse, no question at all. And she's very, very obedient. But so if she's given a vague thing to do, she gets a little bit stressed. Whereas if it is a case of, you know, just watch this video and write down 3 learning points, she will do that, because that's an instruction. So it's clear, isn't it? It's about making those expectations crystal clear, I think. And also something I did with a client years ago, again, just quite by chance, really, was I said, you must do this. You might also want to do that, and you could do this. So it was very, very clear, as a minimum, you have to do this. But I think the other thing that we have to, it's really interesting, let's get your views on it. We're often told, you know, they're not children, they're adults, you know, you can't spoon feed them, you can't insist, it's up to them whether they do it. But as you're saying, sometimes that real clear expectation is helpful and it's not actually condescending. So it's
indeed, especially if they are a passenger or a prisoner or a protester. You know, if you've got participants who want to be there, they signed up because they want the training, they'll do all of it probably. But the others, some people will refuse to do it for whatever reason, and the others might kind of do it maybe, or last minute maybe, or not bother, sort of something in the middle. But so yeah, you can't always guarantee that the people even want to do it, and you can't make someone want to do it.
no.
Always going to be up against that.
Yeah. But I think what's coming through loud and clear is about that clarity and about that managing expectations. So being really specific about what you want people to do, and maybe even explaining why they need to do it. Is that, yeah? Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I was never very good at just following an instruction that was like an order. And my parents used to get really hacked off because I'd go, why? And they'd be like, just do as you're told. Because they're quite, you know, strict. And I'd have to explain to my own parents, because I'm asking why doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. I just need to know the reason so that I can throw myself into it 100%. Otherwise, I'm just a robot. I'm doing as I'm told, and I'm not okay with that. So I would always ask my parents just to give me a reason. And of course, parents are parents, they get exasperated. I don't have to give you a reason, just do it. But this ended up manifesting in corporate, I found it very difficult to just follow orders without someone telling me why. Tell me the bigger picture. I need to know. Show me the vision, show me the mission, pull me along with you. Don't just tell me this little part, because that's all my job is about. I need to see how I fit in. And sometimes I think that's missed out. It's we have like a microcosm happening, but I need to know how it fits into the bigger picture. Otherwise I can't get my head around it at all.
And that's quite a challenge, I think, for training designers. Sorry, I'm sorry for taking you off, Sam.
All right.
But, because sometimes we like to write in exercises that are a bit mysterious, that the purpose will reveal itself at the end. And, you know, we've always said there are some people who will go, you know, I need a volunteer, and straight away they're like, yep, they don't even know what they're volunteering for, but they're up for it. And then you've got people who will sit back and go, oh, I don't know about this, I don't know what's going on. And we can see those people quite negatively. So I can understand why you need to give that context, but equally sometimes you want delegates to find their own learning. Yep. So again, it's that fine balance, isn't it? So it's interesting to think about how much do we show the workings in the margin, and how much do we just go ta-da.
Well, yeah, and a lot of people are really, really against giving like a PDF of what they're going to deliver in advance, because they think, oh, well, if I've given you the PDF, you're either not going to turn up, or if you do turn up, you're not going to pay attention because you've already got it in your hand. Although most people will print off a PDF, staple it nicely, and then put it in a shelf or a drawer, never to be seen again, probably never read in the first place, but they think I've got that information now. So somehow by osmosis, they seem to think they'll know it. It's strange. People do it with books as well. They buy lots of books and they go, oh, I love all these books. I've never read them, but I've got all these lovely books.
Oh, we have that conversation all the time in the VIP group. It's just like, yeah, I've got that book. Oh, I haven't read it though.
Exactly. Human nature is a funny old thing. So I've also put an accessibility checker for handouts and pre-written work into the PDF, which might be handy, just because quite often neurodiversity comes along with some friends, shall we call it, we call it, what do we call it? It's fallen out of my head. Comorbid conditions, there we go, that's the word, which is weird because morbid sounds like it means death, but it doesn't in this case. It just means that things happen simultaneously, and it might be that they have physical challenges, it might be that they have some mental health issues. Remember, mental health and neurodiversity, completely different things. Mental health, anxiety, depression, bipolar, DID, all sorts of stuff like that, schizophrenia, etc. And diversity is the way your brain processes information. So it's not about how well you are. You're not ill because you're autistic. That's very, you know, that's, you need to know that. And having certainty about expectations and instructions is crucial, because quite often anxiety and depression come along with neurodivergence, because the world is a scary place and you're not sure how to be a human in that world. So one of the best things you can do is send a calendar invitation out, or get your client to do so, so they've got it in their diary. There's no kind of, oh yeah, I forgot that was today. You know, that moment they really wanted to come, but they've just didn't put it in their diary. Well, okay, we can help them with that. We can send them a calendar invitation. And if it's an in-person thing in your joining instructions, when I am going to training, I need to know explicit parking instructions. So I need to know, is there a parking lot there? Or is it street parking? Or is there something nearby like an NCP? Do I have to pay? Can I pay with cash, or do I have to phone someone? Because that's really stressful if I've got to try and phone through parking. Half the time you can't even get through. And
that's stressful for all of us, love. That's stressful for everyone.
Exactly. But it's like the layers, all these layers of stress on top of someone who was already stressed. How easy is it to find the building or room? Is there a security level to pass through? Is the room known to be hot or cold? Because some rooms have a reputation for being hot or cold. Is there any pre-work I need to bring with me, print out and bring with me, or send in advance? Do I need to bring any equipment, notebook, pen, laptop, all of those kind of things? Do I need to bring my own refreshments, or are they on site? Will lunch be served? If yes, what will it be? Because if I've got food sensitivity or food anxiety, I'm going to need fully labeled food, and I'm going to need to know in advance if I need to bring my own with me. And that might sound a bit extreme, but there are things I cannot eat, not just because I'm fussy. I have a stomach ulcer, so I can't eat anything spicy. And I've been to buffets where every single thing on the plate is spicy in some way. So I don't get any lunch, and there's no vending machines. And I can't go out because I'm in an industrial estate. There's nowhere to get food. So I sit there with a really grumbly tumbly. So I have to take a bag of cashew nuts with me whenever I go on training, just in case.
I think most people are used to asking if you've got any special dietary needs. I think we're quite good at asking that if you've got any accessibility needs. I think that's, so this is good. But yeah, I mean, it's just general. It's just generally polite, isn't it? Because even as a trainer, when I used to do corporate work, I would turn up somewhere and find that, like you say, they're in the middle of an industrial estate and people bring in their own, but nobody told me. So I'm there delivering training with no food, and it's, you know, that's just not good, is it?
No, because everyone will remember that part. Yeah. I mean, whenever you've done benefits and concerns or feedback at the end, you know, they'll always tell you if the food was great or if the room was cold, or, you know, those environmental things, those things around the training are really important to get right. And if I've got any influence when it comes to the food choices, I'll ask them, do they have low carb food choices? Because I don't want everyone falling asleep in the afternoon, because by 3 o'clock, they're all hunting for sugar because they're like, although to be fair, my training tends to be quite energetic, so that doesn't happen very often. But if I'm delivering other people's material that's usually a bit drier, that can happen. And if you're going to be doing it online, obviously they're going to need some kind of Zoom registration, Teams information, or whatever platform you're using. You will need to send out more emails than you think, because you'll still get people going, oh, I haven't got the link to join. So I always send out the link on the morning, even if it's 6 a.m. before I drive there, or before I'm going to do it on Zoom. I will send out a link in the morning saying, here is your link for today's training. So that it's high up in their inbox. So it's easy to find, even if they have to go to their spam, it's at the top of their spam. They don't have to go hunting for it. And if you ask people to register on things like Zoom, you can keep track of the people. So that's really helpful. And some people will do it immediately. You send them the joining instructions, and some people will do it 5 minutes before they join. And that, you're always going to get that regardless of neurotype, because that's just people. But be really, really clear about that start time. So we might be tempted to say something like, oh, it's 8:45 for a 9 a.m. start time, because you're hoping that people will join in that 15-minute window. But what tends to happen is the early birds will turn up at 8:30 anyway, because you said 8:45. Some people will start drifting in around about 8:45 if you're lucky. And then at 9 o'clock, you've got more people coming in. You've already started the training. They're still coming in, and it's all very difficult. You've got to recap a little bit because someone's just joined again. And it all becomes a bit painful. Whereas if you tell people it's an 8:45 start, and what you've planned, you don't tell them this, is what you've planned is like some breakout networking, or you've got the little fun game for them to do, some gamification of what you're going to do today, or just like Sheridan did today. Sheridan had a slide up and she asked people to annotate the slide, that kind of activity to get them to do something when they arrive, so they're not just sitting there twiddling their thumbs. That's a really great way of making them feel like, oh, I'm glad I joined when I did, rather than, well, what was the point of joining early? And with autistic people, in my experience, because I've worked with a lot of them, they can get quite huffy about these things, which seem really small, but it can set the tone for them for the rest of the day. So getting that tone right at the very beginning, just right, is important. So that's just an idea for how to start things, rather than the 8:45 for the 9 a.m. start. Scrap that and just give them a start time and do something fun before you begin. And I always, when I'm delivering, I always plan to start at 10 past the hour, because even if I say 8:45 start, some people will think that we'll start at 9, but I'm actually going to start at 10 past because I hate recapping.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's good practice, you know, and I always make a point of starting and finishing on time, at least within 5 minutes. But finishing on time as well. I mean, it's not only is it polite, because if you're face to face, obviously people have maybe booked a train or they've got childcare issues. You know, that it's not fair. I mean, years and years ago, Sam, I was working with a client and they wanted to put more and more content in, as people do. And I went, no, we haven't got time. You know, I said, look, we're already working till 5 o'clock. He says, well, they can stay till 5:30. I said, but this is going to take us till 6. He says, yeah, well, we'll work till 6, but tell him it's 5:30. It's like, no, you can't do that. For one, your brain's gone to sleep anyway, but people make plans. And even if you're not neurodiverse, and we've got a friend whose son is autistic, and when they come round, you know, to see us for a meal or something, we have to agree in advance at what time they're going to leave. And if we say they're leaving at 9:30, he stood at the door in his coat at 9:30.
Absolutely spot on.
Fine, he's no trouble whatsoever.
Yeah.
But at 9:30, you said we were going at 9:30. It is 9:30. Let's go.
Yeah, and you can fall into a trap as a trainer if ever you've shared your agenda for your training and you've got timings next to the parts that you're going to deliver. You might find you have more than one person in the room who will be trying to hold you to those times, and they'll tell you if you've run over and you should have moved on to this section now, we're late. And that can be quite confrontational and a bit jarring when somebody does that. They're not trying to be disruptive. They're driven by the clock, and for them that's really important that everyone keeps to time, because then it's ordered and it's safe, and you know, there's less anxiety if everyone sticks to what they said they were going to do. So when I tell people what I'm going to do in an agenda, I'll often tell them when the breaks are instead, and I will aim to achieve the break time, but I will always say these are approximate times. So if I'm a couple of minutes out, please don't shoot me, and I'll set that up right at the start so that I don't have to single anyone out and go, who here's a clock watcher? You know, that's too much. And I don't want to know either. So yeah. I'm very loose with my times.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I didn't do originally, was share my agenda. I used to say, these are the objectives, you know, let's crack on. But someone did feedback that they wanted the agenda, and since that I always have included the agenda, but what I don't put times on. But I will say, this is what we're aiming to cover in the morning. Yes. And this is what we're aiming to cover in the afternoon. Just so people know they've got a rough guide.
They just want a sense of direction and a rough kind of, what are we going to cover today? It just puts their mind at rest rather than where are we going with this.
Yeah, because I didn't realise that was important, Sam, because you know, I just rock up to an event and hope that it's going to be worthwhile and fun and all of those things. But since someone gave me that feedback, I thought actually there's probably at least half the people in the room who would value that. So I do it now, even though it's not for me. So but it's not about us, is it?
And it's another one of those things where you can lose people right at the beginning, because they're always feeling like, I don't really know what's going on, because they haven't got a handle on it. And you want them to be in the room with you, present every step of the way. And even to the point where in the joining instructions, quite often I will cite the main topics we're going to cover, so they've got a heads up. I'm not giving away anything. I'm just telling them, this is what we're going to cover in this session. This is what the training is all about. You know, there will be a break for lunch, and we'll have a couple of extra breaks as well. And that way they're kind of like, oh, right, okay. And usually people want to know when lunch is. So I try to stick to the lunch break, whatever time that is. And I also try to give them plenty of time. I've been in some training sessions where you've got 20 minutes for lunch. And I'm like, that's no time to make any lunch. There's barely enough time to eat any lunch. So I'd have to have got ready some lunch before I started the training. So, or if it's physical training, bring it with me, like a sandwich or something. So yeah, no one wants to rush lunch, and our brains need a break. We need to kind of go after we've learned all that morning stuff. And even when I'm doing it online, I break every hour usually. I mean, with 90-minute session, you can kind of get away with it a bit, especially as there's, you know, different people talking and whatnot. But yeah, I wouldn't make people go longer than an hour. And within that hour, there's all sorts of different things going on. So there's changing of pace, group work, there's exercises, there's lectures, there's all sorts of stuff going on.
Don't say that, because this makes this look bad, because we haven't got those things built in. So
yeah, I'm not doing that in this session. I'm telling you about it. So, and in terms of the client, don't forget your client might be neurodiverse. So it's important to make sure that they know exactly what's going on, what they expect from you, what you expect from them, and getting that really clear. And if it's not clear, don't do anything until it's clear, because you'll get into a pickle. And also make sure they know you're going to have a follow-up session with them afterwards, whether they're neurodiverse or not, because that feedback you've collected, hopefully in the session, will be very valuable when you're having that conversation with the client, because it could lead to extra work, or it could be an opportunity to get referred. So that's always a really good thing, because in that conversation, if they're really chuffed with what you've done, you can always ask the magic question: do you know any other organisations that would benefit from this training?
Not if you're employed. Don't do that if you're employed.
Do you know any other teams that would benefit from this training?
But everything you're saying, Sam, it kind of it reflects what I've always said about designing in detail. Because, you know, as someone who worked externally, clients liked to know what was going to be covered, you know, and that's not a neurodiverse thing. That's a confidence. That's giving them what they need to go, actually, yes, you know, you are going to deliver our objectives. You are going to cover the things that we want. So when we design in detail, we can prove that. Whereas if you just go along and say, trust me, I'm a trainer, it's going to be great, stakeholders can get a bit nervous. So it really ties in with good training design practice. But I think what I'm hearing is it's all about managing expectations, and it's about being as transparent as we can be. So yes, we need to design in detail, but we also need to share that design with as many people as early as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to tell people stuff or give stuff away, because it will come back to you in abundance. Yeah,
and things like, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but if you're including role plays, you know, nobody likes doing a role play, but I'm guessing some people will find that, you know, be very anxious. Yeah. So to let them know, you know, there will be an opportunity to role play. However, there will be other ways that we can explore the learning. And as a designer, you've got to build in those alternatives.
Absolutely. And that meta mirror exercise is really an excellent way of introducing people to role play. I put the people who aren't keen in the observer role first. Usually, once they've seen how it works, they're all right about having a go in the two positions, because they've seen, oh, this is quite low key, actually. It's just the three of us. I'm not doing it in front of the whole class. That was kind of quite fun to watch them and do observations. And now, yeah, having a go and having someone observe me, that I could see how that could work. It's almost like I just need an example of it before I can dive in. And quite often you don't get an example. You just get thrown in at the deep end. Or they think you're going to have to do it in front of everyone, which I never do in my training. I think it just makes people feel really uncomfortable, and I don't want them to feel that way. Okay, so the third part I wanted to talk about was this adaptations and tips for confident delivery. So you've done all this thinking, you've extra thinking, extra work, possibly. I know it's a bit of a pain in the bum, but making sure you factor in these things along the way in your training design just means it's fit for purpose for everyone. And you've done it all. Then it lives as a thing that can be delivered anywhere. And this includes your facilitation techniques. So whether you use questioning, so whether you're using overhead questions or direct questions or rhetorical questions, be aware you might have someone in the audience, possibly who has ADHD. Every single time you ask a question, they might try to answer it, rhetorical, whatever kind of question, because some people don't understand the difference between an actual question and a rhetorical question. So if you say, have any of you ever experienced a difficult person in your training? So that's a rhetorical question. I'm not going, can you unmute yourselves? And can one of you tell me, have you ever had a difficult person in your audience? That's where I've clearly told you I want you to answer the question. So again, at the beginning of your training, when you're setting it up with the people, you could say, when I ask a question where I'm hoping that you'll give me feedback or give me an answer, I'll ask you to unmute yourselves. Otherwise, I might ask broad questions that are general and you're not expected to answer, but please do put something in the chat if you want to, you know, because some people are bursting to answer. They can't help themselves. I delivered training once and I had a guy called Kieran. Right there, he was sat on the front row. Every single question I asked, ooh. He was like a little monkey, ooh, like this. I've got the answer. And sometimes I'd come to him and he didn't have an answer. He just wanted to answer. And I kind of had a verbal contract with him in the break. I said, tell you what, Kieran, if we let other people have a go sometimes, if I always look your way and check in with you, I'll always make sure you get a chance to say something if you want to. But is it okay if I go to some of the other people in the class first sometimes? And he was like, oh yeah, that's fine with me. He just wanted to be seen. He wanted to be acknowledged, respected, and he wanted to feel part of it. So the fact that he knew what he was on my radar for a good reason was enough for him. And I was able to stop that disruption. In fact, he stopped going, ooh, altogether, which was great. And also giving feedback to participants. If you've got someone who's disruptive in any way, in a break, you can take them to one side and have a chat with them. Now, if somebody looks like they're not paying attention because they're on their phone whilst you're training, please don't make the assumption that they're not paying attention. Remember I was talking about the toys and making your creative brain happy so you can listen? For a lot of people, they might need to play a game or idly scroll through Facebook, something, in order to listen properly, because that's how they consume information. It's the same as when people go on a jog and listen to a podcast. They're doing two things at the same time. And it doesn't mean that they're not getting the benefit from both. And so giving feedback to someone like that, if you say, oh, you know, I'd rather you weren't on your phone, ask yourself, why is that? Why do you have a problem with them looking at their phone? Is it because it's your values say that if you're not looking at me, you're not paying attention? Is it that your experience is that if you're doodling or whatever, you're not interested in what I'm doing, and now actually I've got a bit of a confidence crisis because I think you're not interested, when actually what's happening is they need to doodle in order to listen.
EMA positively encourages the doodling, of course. So absolutely. So yeah, just watch out for that if you're going to give someone feedback. So you can have a little thought about, how am I receiving this? What does this mean for me? Am I making an assumption about what's happening? You could still have a chat with them and just say, is everything okay? It might be that eye contact's really challenging for them. I learned how to do eye contact. Like I said, I sort of trained myself to be neurotypical, but it wasn't something that came naturally.
To make.
Say again?
I think that was me. I was accidentally off mute.
Oh, okay, no problem, no worries.
I pressed the wrong button.
That's okay, no worries. Yes, ADHD, train of thought gone, hang on. Oh, feedback to participants, there you go. You can check in with people and you can say, is everything okay? Is there anything I can do more for you? And I was talking about eye contact, that's right. I knew I'd find my way back. And so I had to teach myself eye contact because I understood that a lot of people need eye contact from me so that they are confident that I am listening to them, when in fact, I listen far better when I'm not looking at them. So you might have people who look away like this when they're talking to you. They look kind of thoughtful, maybe. You might have people who frown, but it doesn't mean that they're cross. That's their I'm concentrating face. Or you might have a short delay when people respond. And that's because they're just needing a little extra processing time. Not everybody's like super quick. And I wanted to talk about visual aids as well. So I'm sure you're all very proficient in awesome visual aids, especially as you've been in Sheridan's group for a while. And Sheridan, I'm sure you're amazing.
Well, we've had 2 brilliant sessions on PowerPoint. We had one from Shelley and then we had one from David as well. And they were both brilliant sessions. So yes, there's no excuses.
No excuses at all. But I wanted to share a PowerPoint with you because I wanted to make a couple of points about neurodiverse audiences and PowerPoint that you might not have heard before. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. So I've started off with a black screen, which is quite a good idea because if you're just sort of setting things up, you can set the scene and then go into your first PowerPoint slide. And the first slide I'm going to show you is what I hope none of you do at all. Because as soon as you do this, you will lose people in the room because all they will be doing is reading the slide. They won't be listening to you anymore. You could tell them they won the lottery and they wouldn't hear you. You could tell them that a man's walked in and he's got boobs and they wouldn't hear you because they're reading the slide. Because that's what we do. We read first and listen second. So I hope that there is no bullet points at all. And I hope that you've actually listened to some of the things I've said, despite me putting a bullet point slide, because there was nothing interesting on that slide. So when I do PowerPoint, I use a lot of graphics. I use a lot of pictures. I get them from Pixels and Pixabay, so they're completely copyright free, but I use them to support my material. And if I need words, I use a handout so that they can write on it usually, or perhaps I've got a workbook, depending on the type of training that I'm doing. But the PowerPoint, I believe, is, quite often people go, oh, can I have the PowerPoint slides afterwards? And what they're actually asking for is a handout. They don't necessarily need the PowerPoint slides with bullet points on it that would just dull as dishwater in your training session. Actually, if you give them a handout, they won't want the slides, because the slides on their own, if you just looked at them, they wouldn't mean much. They might trigger something, possibly, but actually they're there to back you up and bring colour and life to what you're saying, to engage the visual people in the room. So when I'm doing a session called niching, I talk about, who is your customer? So here's a customer shaking hands with their client. Why would somebody give you their money? How do you stand out in a crowd? And it might seem a bit cheesy sometimes, but I want you to state the bleeding obvious in the photo. Don't try and be all mystic and cryptic, because you'll lose people in the audience who'll be looking at the photo going, I don't get it. That doesn't match what you're saying. So if you're going to use images, be obvious. I like that one. I think that's really, really obvious. How to stand out in a crowd.
And that's music to my ears, Sam, because I'm really good at being very cheesy sometimes. And again, it also just, I seem to have stumbled across a lot of good practice just through experience, really. Is I've always advocated giving delegates a really detailed workbook, and not just space to make notes. It's got all the information in it. And people who've worked with me will know that on any work, so they've got 10 people on a workshop, there's going to be 3 or 4 people who go through that workbook page by page, and there'll be 3 people who never look at it. But the fact is they've got it, and that's where all the information is if they want it. It's about giving people choices again, isn't it? What's the easiest way for them to access what it is you want them to learn?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you'll choose the right vehicle to deliver it, whether it's the role play, the exercises, the lecture, the case studies, the demonstration, whatever it is that's the right thing for you. And so it's like this picture is about whether someone might have imposter syndrome, or whether or not they feel fully qualified to do something or not. If you've got a wall like this in your house. Sometimes you can use a graphic with words on, but I would always talk people through the graphic that's got words on. Don't leave them to read it on their own. Or you can say, I want you to look at that graphic, and then just shut up. If you're not good with silence, that won't work for you. So talk through the graphic. So you can use words on a slide, but just not bullet points, I would say.
And David showed us with the graphics when he did his about how important it is to really build it up one bit at a time, so people are looking at the bit in the right order.
Yeah, and like I say, it's there to enhance what you're saying. So a lot of people will use slides as a crutch, especially with bullet points on or words on, and they'll look at the slide and then they'll go, oh, right, this is what I'm talking about now, instead of this is what I'm talking about, and then a picture comes up to support what you're saying. It's the other way around. So what does this slide tell you? That hopefully this slide shows some people who look a bit stressed out, a bit anxious, maybe overworked, maybe they've got problems. Using really clear slides that are cheesy and that look really obvious will help neurotypical people and neurodiverse people. So with me and face blindness, and sometimes I can't tell somebody's facial expression, whether or not they're happy, sad, angry, or whatever, seeing something really obvious like this really helps to land the message with me if that person's talking about a stressful working environment. Or in this case, it's asking people what their problems are, what stresses them out, because then you can tell them. When you're niching, you can say, I understand your problem, I know who my competition is, and take my money, because you know what I need. Take my money now. Dip your toe in the water. Do you have social proof? So when people Google you, what will they find? And then if you're giving instructions, you can do it really, really clearly. Big instructions is what I would say. People, for some reason, I'm still seeing slides with teeny tiny little words in the middle of the slide. I'm like, why? It's a big slide. Use the slide, but be careful about colors. I don't know about you, but that's quite challenging for me to look at. Because my glasses are really strong, it does like really weird things when I move my head. It like, I don't know, the colors are like moving. And for some people who are colorblind, they wouldn't be able to see it at all. They work better with different colors like that, which is a lot more subtle. You can put an image behind it, but make sure the image doesn't interfere with the words, because again, it could be too distracting. Oh, what's that image? Oh, like that. And they're not even looking at the word, even though the word's the thing in front. Watch out for font, but you know this, I'm sure. Fancy font, you know, if you're trying to make a point about fancy font, then it's appropriate, like now, but I wouldn't use it. If you've got dyslexia, anything that's away from like Arial or Calibri, anything that's got a flourish on it or of any kind, or a funky G or something, can make it just so much more difficult to read. And you've instantly put a barrier up for them. And they might not know they're dyslexic. They might just think, I can't read that slide. You've lost me now. And if you're going to use an image, I would say don't bother with like having a border like that. Fill the screen with it. If it's a great image, why would you make it tiny? Go bang, there's my image. I'm behind that image. That image supports what I'm saying. Well done, congratulations, way. You can slice things up if you've got images that need to go together. Maybe you're talking about a group of things, that's fine too. But generally, I would normally go for one picture, one slide. You've probably seen this one. People use this one all the time. Success. I'm going to stop sharing there. I've got another slide to show you at the very, very end, but that's fine. But it's yeah, like I said, I'm probably teaching you to suck eggs at this point when it comes to slides, but I just wanted you to see it from a neurodiverse point of view, that there's things that can get in the way and things that can actually help. So lastly, in the last minute or two, I've just wanted to say, if you've got talkative people, chances are they might be introverted and they're masking. So they're being extra chatty because they're trying to convince themselves that they're not anxious and things like that. I'm one of those people. I'm actually an introvert. And anyone who knows me is like, really? Yeah, I am actually. When I've done things I need to pull myself away and have complete solitude to recharge, because I give all my energy out in one go. I don't know how to not do that. And it's just very draining. I don't know how to regulate that. Never could. And but also you get talkative people who love the sound of their own voice. So you can handle them, I'm sure, when you get them. But there might be more than one reason behind it, other than they're just chatty people, is what I'm trying to say. You might get silent types, the one that's gazing at their phone. They might be completely silent, not answer any questions, not put their hand up. That doesn't mean they're not engaged. It might just mean they're a quieter person. You might have crabs. I don't mean the medical condition. I mean people who are crabby and who'll find fault with everything, and they'll even heckle you. And that can be really challenging. And you can get that from people who are autistic. Remember I talked about the person who was like, you're over time, and they won't be able to hold it in. They'll have to tell you. Even though it's an awkward moment, they won't feel awkward. They just feel compelled to tell you. So don't again assume that someone who's finding fault with everything is just being horrible. I was going to use a rude word there. Is just being a pain in the neck. It might actually be that they are compelled to speak up. And then you will get know-it-alls as well. And again, if you've got someone whose specialist subject happens to be what you're training on, they might have gone to the training because they know a lot about the subject, and they think you might be able to add to their great knowledge of the subject. And then they can't help joining in because they know it all. And they're sort of supporting you. Hopefully they're a good know-it-all, but they can be a bit disruptive. So again, you can take them to one side in the break and say, oh, I'm so totally impressed that you know so much about this subject, and I'm really glad you're in this training. It's great to have you. It's almost like I've got a co-trainer in the room. Would it be okay with you if I just went through my slides on my own, and then maybe when I'm asking for some involvement, that's when you can come in and back me up with some anecdotal stories? And again, by having that conversation with that person, they feel validated, respected, acknowledged, and hopefully you'll be able to just sort of shut them down a little bit so that you can deliver your training instead of having a constant interruption from the know-it-all. Most know-it-alls aren't doing it to be mean. They're completely oblivious as to their effect on other people. So even though it's really annoying when it happens, it's just kind of attack that with kindness. So that's it really, other than obtaining feedback in the session, because for pathological demand avoidance, it's really, really hard when someone sends me like a day later an email with, here's a Google form, can you fill out some feedback for me? Well, I can't tell you a time it's actually happened, because I've gone, ugh, or I will do it later. Later never comes. So if you want feedback, get it in the session, pack it into your training so that you can get that feedback live, whether it's a poll, a quiz, post-it note thingy majiggy, whiteboard annotation, whatever it is that you want to use to grab that feedback. Hopefully you're revisiting your expectations that you might have grabbed at the beginning anyway. That's what I do with my training. So we can see that we've met or exceeded people's expectations. And then you can take that with you when you have that conversation with your client, if that's the case, or you can collect that and you can use it as a measure of how well your training landed and any tweaks you might want to make for further delivery. But certainly if you want feedback from me during the session. So I can open it up for Q&A now. Now I've blasted you with everything, and all of this is in the PDF, so you don't have to worry about trying to remember it all. And whilst you think of questions, I'm going to put it in the.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. I think it's really interesting, and I am conscious of time. I just want to give you the opportunity to ask those questions and capture what people have learned. We're not talking about people who've got real difficulties here. We're talking about normal people, our friends, our colleagues, our family, who just have a slightly different way of wanting to work. So, and it's about having that open mind. It's about not seeing them as a pain. It's about saying, actually, that's not unreasonable. So, for example, I got these out, and we'll take some questions as well. I use picture cards quite a lot in training. So I'd say to people, just choose some cards that do what you think is, what leadership is all about. And some people will throw themselves into that, and some people will really struggle until I say choose 6 cards, and then they know what they're doing. So it's just about managing those expectations, isn't it, and being clear.
Absolutely.
So if there are any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or just pop them in chat. Otherwise, I would. Oh, thanks for that handout there, Sam. So if you should be able to download that, and don't say I will send it on to you anyway. Yep. I'll put it in our recording of the VIP group. If you join as a guest, I'll make sure it gets attached to the email tomorrow with the recording. So yeah, any questions at all, or any sort of light bulb moments, I suppose, that you just want to share in there. And I just want to take 2 minutes to tell you about what's happening next month. So I think, I'm not sure, it's difficult to see if people are timing.
I think one thing that I would like to share, just to put my video on, is that we did a big piece when I was working for a previous company about raising awareness about dyslexia in training, because what we were finding is we had a process where people would come through an induction training. They were given 4 weeks to kind of get up to speed with the job, but actually for some people that pressure of the 4 weeks was kind of quite intense, and we were finding that we were having people leaving after 4 weeks, and we noticed a trend. There were people who've been displaying difficulties in actually picking up the learning. So we got the Dyslexia Association in, we did a big piece on that, and as a result we changed the kind of thinking around how much time we need to give people to actually get up to speed, because everybody's different, they'll need different things. And it really had a massive impact on retention in the first 12 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months. So because we've given people the space and the right support instead of a one kind of size fits all kind of thing. And actually we did, as one of the changes we made was we called people up before the training, new starters who were joining the company, just so the trainer could have the conversation. Is there any challenges that you have to learning that I should be aware of that I could maybe support you with, and have those open conversations? And actually, because we'd asked the question, quite a few people actually shared up front. So it was great, because it really got us kind of like thinking about how we could, you know, what we need to do to be inclusive. But because I think when somebody's new on a course and they don't know anybody, they're less likely to want to share that information. But having that conversation privately really made a difference, and it built that trust as well.
Yeah, and like you say, it's you potentially losing good people that you didn't need to lose just for making a small change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, cool.
I keep freezing and I keep getting that internet connection is unstable message. So I thought, I'm just going to throw my slide up just before it kicks me off completely. So yeah, I've got a special offer on at the moment. Normally it's £200, but I'll do it for 90 quid for you guys because you're lovely. And it's £90 for 90 minutes, and it's to go through any kind of training you've got in the pipeline, or even to retrofit some stuff, because sometimes you need to do that. And I'll happily go through and help you to put in all the bits that you need to make that fully robust in terms of being able to serve a neurodiverse.
Fabulous.
Frozen again.
Yeah, only for a second. Only for a second. Sam, if you send that slide to me, I'll make sure that gets included with your PDF as well. Because, like you say, I think it's the sort of thing that you probably only need to be taken through it once, and then you're automatically thinking about that. So that's great. Thank you very much indeed. So just to finish off, I see some of you are popping your light bulb moments in the chat, which is wonderful. And the thing that is really reassuring for me is that it isn't big changes. We haven't got to, you know, go out of our way. It's just about being considerate. It's about managing expectations a lot of the time, isn't it? So that's a big relief for me, just to really keep these people on board. So I've got Sam's details here, but say I will share that slide, getyourmessageacross.com. That's not great there, is it, how that's worked out? Next steps, if you're not already a VIP member, you know you can join us, keep this conversation going. You get all your lunch and learns for free. And obviously it's easier to keep up with the chat and get the handouts and things. Or you can buy an annual pass if membership is not for you. And we've also got now the on-demand learning hub. So which is a bit like VIP membership, but it's an annual subscription. So that's another alternative. And our next Lunch and Learn is all about working with a virtual producer. So we're going to be looking at how we need to design with a virtual, first we're going to look at what a virtual producer can do for you, how we need to design to meet their needs as well as our delegates' needs, and just how to really use their skills to best effect. So we've got a virtual producer coming in to help us with that next time. And that's going to be on the 4th of December, so of the first Friday, November, 5th of November, it is bonfire night. I remember now, we're doing it on bonfire night. So all that information is on the website, traindesignersclub.co.uk. So you can join us in any format that you want to. So I'm going to say thank you very much. Thank you to Sam for that really insightful presentation that you've done for us. Thank you all for joining and sticking with us to the end. If you do have any questions, I do have to shoot off quite promptly today, but I'm happy to stay on just for 5 minutes, or of course just email me or contact me in the group. So I'm just going to stop sharing if I can. How can you stop sharing? It does that. There we go.
I didn't see your share.
Oh, did you not? There we go then. But I explained everything that was on the slides anyway, so that's okay.
Thanks, Sheridan.
All right then. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and I hope to see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sheridan. Thank you, Sam. It was really useful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cool.